Hi there, this is Prince of Cups 518, and I am the owner of a tarot blog, tarot and medieval stuff and music and whatnot. It's called Polyphony, and I'll have the link to it in the bottom bit. But anywho, the purpose of this video is to kind of explain to you my method that I've developed kind of independently um, for reading positional spreads. I'm someone who likes to practice the opening of the key. I don't know if any of you have heard of that before, but it is one of the most potent spreads you can use, and it doesn't involve any positions. And there's a power in that that's really quite useful. There's a philosophy behind that too that it's also very useful. That events and life do not happen in little boxes, that everything interacts with everything else, and that life is all about interconnectivity. So basically what I'd like to do is give you just a series of techniques that I use, using an example reading, using the Rider-Waite tarot deck. I specialize more in the Crowley-Tot, but since most people tend to use the Rider-Waite, especially on YouTube, it seems, I decided to use that, trying to make it a little more accessible. So I suppose to basically explain where I'm coming from with these methods is I'm very much interested in the Kabbalistic astrological attributions of the cards, which give us the inherent meanings that they have today. The meanings weren't picked from a hat. So I think that language of archetypes and symbols that underlie the images in the cards and their divinatory meanings are very important in understanding the language that is, or the interplay of language that is happening between the cards. No card is entirely isolated, although some are more isolated than others, and that's what this method will help you find, which cards are particularly unstable and which cards have a lot of influence in the reading, which elements, which archetypes are really strong. And this is sort of, I suppose, a scientific way of looking at things. I compare it to the Hebrew or Kabbalistic gematria, where each word has a numerological value, and every other word that shares that same numerological value with it also shares kind of a resonance and meaning, or some kind of subtle connectivity with that first word. So, so essentially that's where I'm coming from. That's my, I guess, legitimizing piece. A lot of people on the internet often not necessarily criticize, but play down the amount of Kabbalistic knowledge that you need, or astrological knowledge that you need to read tarot. And I think that's partially valid, but I also very strongly believe, in anything that is a pseudoscience in this sense. It's not entirely a pseudoscience, and I feel like we as, New Agey types or whatever should kind of have ways to stick it to the skeptics and say, well, no, there's a very strong historical background to these cards that give them a scientific language that we can tap into. And some people might take this method as too analytical and too nitpicky, and not intuitive enough. And to those people, I would say that this is, first of all, just another way of doing things, but that this is sometimes a way that you can use to confirm your intuition. Sometimes you'll get a vibe about cards or the way they feel, and when you look at the actual symbolism underneath them, that hunch tends to make more sense, or it doesn't. and you can kind of confirm or not confirm your inner workings. So these are just ways of jump-starting your intuition and shouldn't be viewed as ways of supplanting your intuition. Okay, so I've already shuffled and everything, and drawn the cards, and I'm just going to lay them out in a basic Celtic Cross, and I'll tell you the card and the position for each one. So for the overall situation for the querent, we have the Ace of Wands, so that you can see it. There's a glare. For the obstacle or thing that's covering that situation, they have the Three of Pentacles. For the root of the situation, what is missing in the situation, or what is kind of their reason for this situation, this problem, is the Ace of Swords. Their immediate past is the Ace of Cups. And this is not a person, this is just an example that I drew. Their highest self, their kind of what they know to be true, their intuition, is the Queen of Swords. And their immediate future is Temperance. How they see themselves, or their ideology, is the Ten of Swords. Their environmental factors are the Wheel of Fortune. Their hopes and fears are the Nine of Cups, or rather are, whatever. The final outcome is the Eight of Swords. Okay, I'm just going to put this over here for the sake of room. So I'm not going to go into specific divinatory definitions of each card, because that seems foolish. There are other videos for that, or tools online that you can find. But I'm going to go over kind of the attributions of each. And their relative connections to each other. So the first thing that I really like to look at is whether or not we have an elemental imbalance, or what exactly our elemental layout is. And right from the get-go, we can see that there's a fairly sizable preponderance of air cards. So air being the sign of communication, problems, issues, conflicts, abstract thinking, that sort of thing. We can see that that's what the querent really is elementally, and that other aspects of the are kind of equally dealing with emotional ends of their lives. They have 2 water cards and 2 fire cards. And that makes up the spread, except for this one lone earth card and the Three of Pentacles. So right from the get-go, we can see that the Three of Pentacles is not very strong. And that is really the hub. I mean, not only is it positioned that way, but it's also elementally the most lacking thing. Additionally, we can therefore say that the water cards kind of have a resonance with each other, the fire cards have a resonance with each other, and all the air cards kind of make up a family too, which leaves the earth card feeling really kind of lonely in a way. So that's elements. The other kind of thing that we like to look for is type. So we have 3 aces, that's the most noticeable thing. And so, I mean, aces represent power, potential, nothing that's been manifested yet, but things that have a really fresh vibe to them, and things that the querent can really make their own if they so choose, but they're really not manifested yet, and that's important to remember about aces. So we see that it makes really a chunk out of this spread. It's not even like the aces are spread out. Their foundation right now, the whole basis of this situation is about newness. And I mean, that's kind of obvious in the fact that the Ace of Wands is the overall situation. But the fact that they have 3 aces tells us, in this chunk, tells us that these 3 potentials are kind of all related to each other. The Ace of Cups being a potential for a love relationship or a new change of feeling or sentiment, the Ace of Wands being a new project or endeavor or path to take, and the Ace of Swords being clarity, and in this case being a lack of clarity. Perhaps the Ace of Cups and the Ace of Wands are both things that the querent is unclear about, and that they're all kind of becoming this unclear, vague sense of newness that the querent clearly knows that they have to address. Perhaps that's evidenced by the Queen of Swords. But that chunk of aces is something that our eye is immediately drawn to. The other type of thing we like to look at is, or that we should be looking for rather, is number of majors. And we see that there are only 2 majors in this spread, Temperance and Wheel of Fortune. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're connected, though in this case they are, and I'll get to that eventually. But it does show that there are, some factors that the querent doesn't necessarily have control over. But overall, this is very much in the sphere of their mental workings. That this isn't necessarily a problem with other people, or, I mean, especially since there's only 1 court card, so we could say that there might be 1 person involved, but that they're a positive figure since they're in the what the querent is aware of situation, end of things, and they're paralleled with the Ace of Swords. They're polarized with it. So it's almost as if the Queen of Swords is directly connected to the lack of clarity, in the sense that the Queen of Swords is a figure who is being clear, or does have a sense of clarity and direction for the querent, and is guiding them properly, and that they should be listening to her more if they aren't. In addition to that, I also like to look at the signs of the cards. And in this case, since we have 3 aces, there are kind of not many signs to look at, but the 3 of Pentacles is Mars and Capricorn. The Queen of Swords is Virgo and Libra, or 1/3 Virgo, 2/3 Libra. Temperance is Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. The 10 of Swords is the Sun and Gemini. The Wheel of Fortune is Jupiter. The 9 of Cups is Jupiter and Pisces. And the 8 of Swords is Jupiter in Gemini. So if hearing that, you can kind of hear Jupiter popping up a lot in those attributions. Jupiter is clearly a very strong element here, and it's even referenced in the environment card. So we can see the Wheel of Fortune as essentially as being the real hub of this issue, that the real hub of the issue isn't necessarily the Ace of Wands, but that it's a disparity between this hub of discomfort, of lack of foundation in the 3 of Pentacles, with this kind of environmental shift in what the querent is doing. It's as if things have suddenly very much changed for them, and very suddenly in their environment, and that might be particularly shocking to them in a way, or there's a lot going on in their environment that seems to be very positive, doesn't seem to be that negative because there's such a Jupiterian element. Remember that Jupiter is the planet of generally of good fortune, though it doesn't necessarily have to be. I tend to read Jupiter as a planet of benevolence and mercy. And so that element is very strong here. Temperance is also ruled by Jupiter, so we see that the outcome continues to be favorable. The final outcome is perhaps tempered a little bit by the fact that we've got such good fortune and good prospects everywhere else, but it's kind of up in the air, as it always is, the final outcome, especially since we've got the 10 of Swords kind of resonating with it. So there's something here, there's a connection here that we should be paying attention to. So this tells us that either all these opportunities that are popping up in the querent's life kind of unexpectedly, they could either eventually become too distracting, or they'll be too much on the querent's plate for them to be able to focus still, or that they'll, I see the 10 of Swords in this case because there's such a strong positive air element from Jupiter, that the 10 of Swords doesn't necessarily have to be that bad. There are so many aces, there's such a feeling of newness, and the 10 of Swords is always kind of seen as a card of, the clearing away of the storm, so that, you've kind of gone through a trauma and you're ready to move on into a new chapter. And so that's seemingly what's going on. The querent feels like they've been through a traumatic experience, that they've been beaten down by things. Perhaps they feel like life has in some ways beaten them down. The Wheel of Fortune has in some ways been negative to them. But at the moment, they're very happy with their situation. They have the 9 of Cups, also connected to Jupiter. Things have really turned around for them. They've perhaps entered this potential relationship that they're very interested in, and they expect in the 9 of Cups to come to some kind of fulfillment or fruition.